I've been asked several times by several people what my testimony is. There's this misconception that I've been with Jesus all my life. No, he's been with me, but I wasn't with him. I guess my testimony started in 2000. My then husband asked me for a divorce. We'd been together almost 20 years. In fact, by the time the divorce was over, we were together for 22. It came as such a surprise. You hear that proverbial ice bucket of water? Well, he hit me with an ice bucket of water, simply because he didn't want to be married anymore. I had nowhere to go, so I packed up my dog, split the household goods. We didn't have children, so it was an easy split. I found my way to 29 Palms, where I was for 2 years, and in the time that I was there, I turned to alcoholism. I became one of those drunks that before I had despised. Somebody who looked forward to getting drunk and lived for their next moment to get drunk, who would go home for lunch and have a drink, who would drink all weekend and pass out and wake up and drink again and pass out. It was a non-ending cycle. I had a DUI. I wrecked and totaled my car. I was a mess. I used drugs, and I smoked up to 2 packs of cigarettes a day. All these things made me very ill, but I didn't recognize it as illness. I blamed the lethargy and fatigue on having to work 2 jobs. One job did not afford me my rent and car payment and everything I needed to survive. So I had 2 jobs, which very often had me working 14 consecutive days before I had a day off. And I was miserable. I didn't really know anybody, and I hid from my family. Until one day, an old friend convinced me that I needed to be back in Barstow. He convinced me that I needed to be here because this is where the people that loved me were. So he brought me home in April of 2002. Within a few weeks, on May 15th, I awakened one morning with searing pain in my legs. Felt like gasoline was running through my veins, and I couldn't walk. I screamed for an ambulance, and they took me to the local hospital, and the physician on duty told me that there was nothing they could do for me, that I needed a vascular surgeon. And I knew when I heard that word, vascular, that I was in deep shit. So they put me in an ambulance, and my mom followed all the way to Loma Linda University Medical Center. I guess they called ahead because I was met at the emergency room door by 3 vascular surgeons. They didn't examine long. They took one look at me, in fact, and in very bold terms, no nonsense and no sugarcoating, told me that if my legs were not amputated at the hip that night, that I would die. I took one look at my dear, sweet mother's face and saw that pain. And I knew that 2 things. That I had heard exactly what I thought I had heard. And I had to be brave because I didn't want to see that look on her face ever again. So they took me into surgery that night, and to my surprise, I woke up the next morning and I still had both of my legs. What what they did once they got in there was they'd found a bunch of blood clots, and they started pulling them out. One was 4 feet long. They felt that by pulling out the blood clots and putting stents in, that they could possibly save the leg, that they could possibly improve the circulation enough. So we waited, and within 5 days my left leg was doing a lot better. The color had returned, but the right leg was black. So they took me in, and rather than removing the leg at the hip, they were able to save it and took it off from the knee down. Now I was in intensive care for several weeks after that surgery. I had a lot of visitors. My family, my brother flew in from West Virginia. But I knew when the clergy came to visit me that I probably wasn't going to make it. So I started to pray. And before I could finish my message to the Lord, I had a very warm sense, almost like a pouring warm, thick honey down over my head, and slowly it covered and enveloped my body in this warmth that I can't describe. It was truly physical, but I knew that it was the Lord. I knew that I was going to live, that I was going to be okay. I had a long, hard row to hoe, but He was going to be there, and He was. And I turned my life over to Him that day. I followed Him for years. Then in 2008, the left leg started the same symptoms again, with the pain and the burning, and I kind of knew what was going to happen, but I fought it. I'm very stubborn. I'm my mother's daughter. And that leg was not the boss of me. So I underwent debriding surgeries. I went through 3 of those, but the wound wouldn't heal. They put me on a wound vac. That didn't work. They put me on very strong antibiotics in a permanent IV in my arm so that I could get them 24/7. They were so strong, in fact, that they damaged my kidneys. The antibiotics damaged my kidneys. So I lay here, and this time I was praying to die. I knew the Lord, and I knew where I stood with Him. I knew I was forgiven. I knew that the day was going to come, that I was going to look into His face. And I prayed for that day to be sooner than later. But yet I woke up every day. Say, what are your plans for me, Lord? There has to be plans for me here on earth, or I wouldn't be here. What's the plan for the suffering, Lord? Well, I had home care nurses. And the head nurse, the one in charge of my case, came into my room one day and told me that they couldn't do anything else, that they had already done everything that they were going to do, that I was septic, that I had gangrene, and that leg too needed to be amputated, or gangrene would claim my life. The next morning, my mother and my aunt took me to Arrowhead Regional Medical Center. And it was almost it was like deja vu all over again. I got into the emergency room where doctors met me, and before I was in the hospital, 24 hours, they had taken off my foot, the left foot. I thought it was over. I lay there for 3 days thinking it was over. that I could go home. They hadn't taken my leg, but they had taken my foot, but that was okay. I still had my leg. And then I was preparing myself to go home when the surgeons came into my room, and once again my mother was there. They told me they had to amputate again. They told me that they had not taken off enough of the leg and that they were still finding gangrene. They took the left leg off right below the knee. But this time I was healthier. I was healthier mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I had the Lord. I knew He had a plan for me. I just needed to wait and live long enough to figure out what it is. So today, I'm in a wheelchair. But I really am happy. I feel great. I'm healthier than I have been since 2002, all those years ago when Dean asked me for a divorce. I'm happy because Jesus lives in my heart. I'm happy because I still have my wonderful mother who never left my side. I'm happy because I have a wonderful church. A church family that loves me and cares for me, takes care of me. But especially since I'm happy, especially because even without legs, I can walk with the Lord. Even without legs, I have value in Him. And I'm still going to wait to find out what His purpose is for me. We'll just start here with my testimony. If you're diabetic, take care of your feet. If you don't know the Lord, get to know Him. 2 words of advice from the wise. Thanks for listening.